Earlier this year, I found out that I had fibroids. I remember beginning of the year, I went on a girls' trip for my 30th birthday. So after I got back from my birthday, around February, I started having headaches on the left side of my head every single day. It was like clockwork. And until I took one singular 200 milligram Advil, it went away for the rest of the day. So every day I was just doing the same thing. I did this for about like 2 months. It would get bad sometimes because some days I'd be like, no, I don't want to take any Advil. Let me just drink water. Let me just rest. And it would still happen. And especially when I was at work, I was like, no, let me take the Advil and let me just get work done. You would think that as a pharmacist that I would realize that taking Advil every day probably isn't a good thing. I ended up scheduling a checkup with my doctor because it's been like 2 years since I had a physical. Not on purpose. Every time I had another doctor and she ended up leaving that practice. So finding another doctor, as you all know, can be very difficult, but that's still no excuse. I should have gone to the doctor, but I scheduled a checkup, and the crazy thing, God is so good. The crazy thing is, I remember I was like a couple minutes late because of traffic. And I remember the receptionist like, oh, let me see if the doctor can even see you still. And she kind of had like a little bit of an attitude. And I was ready to walk out of that door and be like, you know what, forget this. Like, I really don't, like, I have other things I can do. I don't need a checkup right now. But it was kind of like, I know it was God and the Holy Spirit really just like prompting me to stay. I mentioned the headaches and she was just like, that's not normal having a headache every day. And I'm like, oh, that's why I'm mentioning it. So I let her know. She's just like, okay, well, over the next like couple weeks, I want you to kind of figure out like when you're having the headache, what time of the day, is it around your cycle? And I was like, okay. And then she was like, and then we can have a virtual visit and we can go from there. So since it was a regular physical, she did blood work and sent me on my way. So this was on a Friday. On Monday, I was still having the headaches and they were starting to get increasingly worse. So Monday, I remember I was at work and the headache was so bad. And I remember getting a call from the doctor and she calls me in a panic. Like, you need to go to the emergency room. You need a transfusion. Like, your iron levels are like crazy low. Like, she was just like, do you have like a bleed somewhere? Like, she was freaking out. And I was just like, huh? And I signed into Quest, like to see my labs myself. And so I sent them over to my friend who's a doctor, Kalita. And she was just like, whoa, girl, like I think you need a blood transfusion. I was like, what in the world? Like, what is happening? And I went straight to the hospital. They did blood work again. And he was like, your hemoglobin is a 6. It was a 6.1 or something like that. And he was like, have you been like tired, dizzy? Like, I was like, no, literally the only thing I've been experiencing is the headache. And so he was like, you need a blood transfusion. And I was just like, I don't want that. Literally, I remember leaving the hospital without getting the blood transfusion because I was just like, I don't 100% feel comfortable with that. So I ended up going to a hematologist the next day. They also did labs again. The hematologist sat me down and was just like, you cannot be walking around with a hemoglobin of a 6. This is very dangerous. You need to go get a blood transfusion. And I just remember I was like bawling and crying. And I was just so scared because I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is happening inside my body? And the crazy thing is that, how they explained it to me eventually was that because I had such low iron and because my body didn't have like enough blood, essentially, my heart was working super hard to try to like pump whatever blood that I did have to oxygenate my organs. and my brain wasn't getting enough oxygen, and that's why I was having the headache. And it was so interesting because a year prior to that, I remember having these like random heart palpitations. Like it was so weird. And I remember going to a cardiologist. He did an EKG. He was like, "You're fine," and sent me on my way. So I kind of believe that like a year prior, this could have been caught. I don't know if cardiologists routinely do blood work, but I think if blood work would have been done, this also could have been caught. But you know, I'm not pointing fingers. Everything happened how it was supposed to. The first night when I was at the emergency room, my mom, she was telling me that literally that night and that morning she had a dream that someone was telling her like, hey, one of your kids is getting airlifted to a hospital like for an emergency because of a head issue. And then the person starts laughing in their face as my mom and dad are like sad. And when she told me this, I was like, wow. Like I knew the enemy was trying to take me out at that very moment. And I just remember when I was driving to the emergency room, I was just praying and I was just asking God, I'm like, okay, God, like, usually you show me certain things in advance, you know, whether through dreams or what have you. Like this is throwing me, this is like, I'm blindsided right now. What happened? And then as soon as my mom told me that dream, I kind of was just like, oh, okay, God, you gave the dream to my mom. And so I was just like, okay, yeah, this is spiritual. So I just remember going home and praying, and then the next day going to the hematologist. And then after I left the hematologist, I went back to the hospital and ended up having to get the blood transfusion. When I was there, my mom came. And I tell you, we prayed over that blood. We like, it was just like the nurses were just like, my mom was just like, can I see it? Because like the nurses was like, oh yeah, it's the right blood type, everything, mom. And then she was like literally praying, and I was like, no, she's praying. And then I was praying, and I was just like, Lord, like cover this, like cover me. I'm your daughter, like cover me under your blood. Like I was just like, Lord, I pray as this blood is about to go in me that it is transformed to your blood. In all seriousness, like, you know, I was really praying. So after I got the blood transfusion, I had to go to the hematologist a week after. They took my blood, and my hemoglobin went up to an 8, which was still not great, but better than a 6. I started feeling way better. Like the headaches stopped, like they were gone completely after that. So after that, I had to get iron infusions. So the hematologist wanted me to do 5 weeks of iron infusions. So I had to do that every week. After that, I was kind of just like living life, whatever, like, okay. And my doctor told me like, you need to see a gynecologist because you don't have a stomach bleed. Like they did like a CT, like my head was fine. They were like, you probably like, this is probably through your cycle. So I never thought that I had like a heavy period or anything like that. I just thought it was normal because like I had nothing to compare it to. But when I was talking to the gynecologist, she was like, how often are you changing? How often, like, what is your blood flow like? And I was like, you know, I do wear the oversized overnight pads like daily. I change like every 1 to 2 hours. She was like, that's not normal. I was like, I wouldn't have known that. Like, how was I supposed to know that? So I ended up having to get an ultrasound, and so it took like a few weeks to even get the ultrasound, which I was just like, I don't know why it took so long, but I ended up having to get an ultrasound, and the girl who was doing the ultrasound, she was just shocked because I was supposed to do an ultrasound where they check on my stomach, and then another ultrasound where they kind of go in and see everything. So I was scared out of my mind because like I never had to do that before, and y'all know like I'm a virgin. Like this is like a lot. So she was just like, okay, like, have you ever had this before? I was like, no. And then I literally just asked her, I was like, is this gonna hurt? Like, she was just like, no, she just be a little uncomfortable. And then she was just like, when was the last time you were sexually active? I was like, never. And she was like this girl was like, I was like, she was like, you know what? Like, she literally cleaned me up. She was just like, never mind. We're just going to do a stomach ultrasound. I was like, don't you want to ask the doctor about that? Like, didn't she schedule me to do? I was just like, okay. So she does the ultrasound, and literally, like, as soon as she puts the thing on my stomach, I see her clicking and taking pictures and clicking and clicking. And I was like, that is not a good sign. And she says nothing. So then I go to the gynecologist's office, like right after that, and she walks in and she was just like, you have fibroids. And I was like, I just didn't even know how to respond. I didn't even know how to like process what she was saying, but she was just like, you have fibroids and they're pretty big. I was like, okay. She was just like, so we have some options here. And I was just like, okay. So she was just like, we can start you on birth control, just to kind of alleviate the bleedings because you're losing a lot of blood and we can't let your hemoglobin go back that low. So I was just like, no, I'm not doing birth control. Like personally, I just was like, no. And the reason why I was very much against birth control for me, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but because literally a year before all of this, I remember having a dream where I was like in a hospital bed. The doctors were trying to give me this injection called Depo-Provera, and it's a birth control. It's a contraceptive like injection, a Depo shot. And I just remember fighting them and telling them, no, 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 I'm not taking that. And I just remember waking up so confused because I'm like, I'm not looking into birth control. Like I was just so confused. And I just remember praying. And I remember texting my friend, like, I feel like the enemy's coming after my womb. And I just remember praying. And that was that. So as soon as she said birth control, I was like, no. Because I knew God kind of showed me ahead of time, like, do not go that route for whatever reason. A lot of times like God will show you certain things that don't make sense, but you just have to trust that because he is your creator, he knows what's best for you. And that's why I said personally for me, I declined it. So then she was just like, but we got to get these out because this is, affecting your quality of life. Like, and also to have children in the future, we got to preserve your fertility. We got to make a home for the baby in your uterus because the fibroids are like taking up space. She was just like, I usually do not recommend surgery. I always try to figure out other options first. But she was just like, you have 6 fibroids. One of them is like 7 centimeters. Like, you got to get a myomectomy. So I was just like, whoa. When I tell you, it was just so much information. I just remember leaving there, texting my sister and my friend, and I was just like explaining everything. And like, it didn't hit me at all until like much, much later. I was starting to get headaches again. And I remember going back to the hematologist for my 2-month appointment, like after the iron. And she was like, your hemoglobin went back down to an 8. I was like, what? Like, I was just so confused. And she was just like, you got to do another round of iron infusion. And so I had to do another round of that. And I just remember there was one day that I was sitting for them to like, find a vein to put the IV in, and they could not find a vein. They had to put my arms in these warmers. And I just remember sitting there and I just got so overwhelmed. And I'm like, how is this my life right now? I remember calling my friend like that day, and I was just crying. I was just like, my mom doesn't have this. Like, my sister doesn't have this. Like, why me? Like, why is this happening to me? Like, I was kind of just like battling and wrestling with God in the sense of just like asking him, like, why is this happening? Like, did I do something? Thank God for my friend. She was just, so encouraging and just reminded me that like God is faithful at the end of the day. The next day, I finally spoke to my leaders at church. When I got overwhelmed, I realized like, okay, I need to talk to my leaders at church. Of course my friends and my family knew what was going on, but it was funny because literally like that day, my leader texted me like, hey, like, how are you? And I was like, oh, wow, okay, then definitely need to talk to her. So I sat down and just kind of explained everything. And I was literally shaking. Like, I don't think y'all understand like how much like I was literally chilling since I found out I had fibroids. Like, oh, okay, I got to get surgery, like whatever, going with emotions, going with life. And it literally hit me that weekend. So I was literally telling her and I was like shaking. And it was so encouraging because literally at the end of it, she was just like, how are you doing emotionally? Like, and I was like, wow, like literally yesterday, I was like crying my eyes out. She was just like, you're allowed to have emotions. Like, you are human. And kind of just literally saying everything that like I was processing through. And I was like, wow, God, like, thank you. Like, I needed to have a moment. I needed to process, my emotions and my feelings. And that was okay. So then she was just like, have you talked to the pastors? Like, let them know. And I was like, no. And she was like, okay, let's go talk to the pastor now. I was like, oh, this is what we're gonna do. So I ended up going to talk to my pastor, the first lady, and I kind of just explained everything to her. She was just like giving me words of encouragement. It was literally like the day before we were gonna start the 21-day fast at church. And she was just like, during this fast, you need to pray, you need to fight, like you need to seek God. And she had shared among a lot of other things that were definitely encouraging. And I didn't even like put two and two together that like before starting a fast, the enemy's gonna try it. And me getting overwhelmed wasn't a coincidence. Like, oh snap, like we're about to fast. Like, this is why I'm feeling overwhelmed. Like, so I was just like, all right, God, it's me and you. Like, let's do this. And she even told me, she was just like, during this fast, don't schedule anything, don't schedule any surgery, just like focus on the fast. So I was like, oh, okay. And it was so interesting because literally that morning I had texted Giselle and I was just like, I don't feel like going to church. Like, I really don't feel like it. And she texted me back. She was just like, go to church. God has a word for you. And I was just like, okay. And it was so crazy that literally like I'm talking to the pastor. She's sharing like all this encouragement, my leader sharing all this encouragement. And I'm like, wow, like God really did have a word for me. So the day that you don't feel like going to church is the day that you need to be at church because God has a word for you. I promise you. So during the fast, you guys can watch my video on that. I didn't share exactly what was going on, but I shared it there. So during the fast, I am praying, I am fasting to the best of my ability. When I first found out that I had the fibroids, it was so interesting because Pastor Stephanie Ike, you guys know I love watching her sermons and listening to her. She was sharing about complications that she was having when she found out she was pregnant. And how she was going through all this pain and all this stuff, but she never like went into detail about like why, which I did not care. Like I was just like, I just had noticed that. And I remember literally the day that I found out I had fibroids, I think it was a day or two later, she posted a sermon where she spoke somewhere else at another church. And she shared the reason why she was going through so much pain is because the doctors told her that she had 4 fibroids. And I was just like, I'm like, how interesting is it that she didn't share this whole time, but literally the week that I find out I have fibroids, she shares that she found out she had fibroids. And she was just sharing how God encouraged her and showed her that everything's going to be fine. Her baby's going to be fine. And I just remember just feeling like everything's gonna be okay. It was just showing me that her pregnancy was fine, her baby was healthy, even though they were telling her to terminate her pregnancy. And it just gave me hope to just know that, like, regardless of what the doctors say, regardless of how this all plays out, like, God is sovereign and everything is gonna be fine. So that was just so interesting. And that just shows like God was really like all over this from the jump. Like the enemy tried it, but God was like, skirt, skirt. I already died on the cross, so this is covered. So during the fast, I remember having a dream where God kind of just, I won't go into detail of the dream, but God really just showed me that the concerns and the fears that I have surrounding fibroids and what happens after and further on in my life is going to be fine. Like he literally showed me like everything is going to be fine. And so I was just like, whoa. Like I literally like woke up from that dream like, whoa. And there were just some key details in the dream that also kind of deterred me from getting an open myomectomy, which is what my gynecologist was suggesting because that's all she knew how to do. So I ended up having an appointment with one of her co-surgeon. She was like, you know, I need you to see the co-surgeon before we can schedule the surgery. So I remember meeting with the co-surgeon and she was like, you know, I don't think you need surgery. I was like, what? She was like, you know, let's just take out the one fibroid that's causing the bleeding on your lining and go from there. I was like, so what about the other ones? She was like, you know, you can still have children with the fibroids. It just might be more painful, but you know, we'll monitor that. And I was just like, okay. So she scheduled the hysteroscopy where she would just take out the one fibroid vaginally and just leave the rest of them there. And I was just like, okay. So this was like weeks out. So I was like, all right, cool. So she also recommended I see a fertility specialist. So I go to the fertility specialist and he does a full exam, which I was not expecting. I literally thought he was we're just gonna have a conversation about like fertility, what it's looking like, what like all these things. He does a full blown exam, an ultrasound, everything. He was like, wow, this is bad. I was like, oh my gosh. And he kind of was just sharing that like you have a lot of fibroids and you got to get them out. He was like, this was the part where like I knew God was just really just like trying to like just like speak to me very clearly about what I need to do, because that was my prayer point. I'm like, God, heal these fibroids. God, show me what to do. Like, God, I'm just trusting you, whatever the situation is. So he was just like, before removing the fibroid, he was like, I don't recommend that this doctor takes out only the one fibroid. He was like, I don't recommend you get any surgery until you shrink these fibroids. And I was like, how are we going to shrink the fibroids? If we can shrink the fibroids, then why do we need surgery? He was like, I recommend you start Depo-Lupron. And I was like, wow, that sounds very much like the injection that I had the dream about a year ago that I was like, heck no. And so I'm just listening to him and he was just like, yeah, this acts in the brain and basically it just shuts off the estrogen production in your body. So that way it can shrink the fibroids. And then once the fibroids shrink, then we can do the open myomectomy to remove the fibroids. And I was like, huh. And it's so interesting that like how like doctors speak to you about certain medications, because he was like, you know, you'll experience hot flashes, but like did he know as a pharmacist at that point? Either way, I was like, in my head, I'm like, doesn't that put your body in like a menopausal state? And then I was like, doesn't this drug cause like osteoporosis like even after it's done? I was just like, wait a second, I had a dream, even though it wasn't the same drug. I was like, yeah, I don't think this is what God wants for me, because he literally gave me a dream a year ago before I even knew I had fibroids that this is not something that I need to take. So I was just like, okay, I just listened to him, got on my scans, and I left there and I did not look back. Because I was like, absolutely not, I'm not taking that drug. Um, so I just remember calling the surgeon that I scheduled the hysteroscopy to remove the one fibroid, and I called her and I was like, hey, like the fertility specialist is saying that that's not a good idea. Like I should take this injection. And she was like, honestly, what I'll recommend you do, we can cancel the procedure. I recommend that you see a oncology surgeon who is very skilled at robotics, who can robotically remove the fibroids instead using like a camera, and it's less invasive than an open myomectomy. So I was like, okay. Why wasn't that option presented before? But I was like, okay, like, let's look into that. So I scheduled that, and I was just like, all right, let's just see. So I was just like, let me research, like, since she had mentioned like laparoscopic robotic, I was like, let me research like laparoscopic myomectomies and just go from there. So I had reached out to a couple places like via like their process of contacting them. And then one of them contacted me, and they were like, oh, like your insurance is out of network, but you could like pay out of pocket. And I was like, nope, like, I'm not doing that. So then I found another place. They called me back. They're like, your insurance covers everything. We can set up an appointment a week from now to speak to the surgeon. So I was like, okay, great. So I'm just going on Instagram, and it was just like, the waters are stirred. You better make sure you step in. I just saw that and I was just like, oh, okay. I just kept tapping, but it just stuck out to me. So then I remember I was like driving to work, and I see a license plate and it says Lord, and then it has numbers. I looked back at it again and it said LRD, not Lord, but I was like, it jumped out to me. And I was just like, God, are you telling me to call you? That's literally what I said. And I looked up the numbers in the Strong's Concordance to see like biblically like what it meant. And when I looked it up, it said that those numbers mean stirring, like stirred up, like stirred. And I was like, oh wow, that was just like the post I saw about like the water is stirred, like you better step in and kind of like step into your healing, like the Bible verse, how the angel will stir the water. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. And it didn't click until I realized that I had to speak to the surgeon that day. And I remember speaking to the surgeon because I had to send everything. I had to send my scans, I had to send all that. He was just like, I think that we can do this. He was like, you do have a lot of fibroids, but we can remove them laparoscopically. It's minimally invasive. Like, I think that this procedure would be a good fit. He was explaining that the procedure is called LAAM, laparoscopic assisted abdominal myomectomy. Because I kept saying laparoscopic myomectomy. They're like, it's laparoscopic assisted abdominal. I was like, okay, so it's a little different than like the robotic, which takes like hours. And this procedure only took like an hour and a half or so, or 2 hours. And so he was just like, I think that would be a good fit for you. And I was asking so many questions, and he was answering all my questions. And I kind of just felt at peace. And I was like, okay, I really think that we're going to go with this. And I kind of was just like, okay, God, like, and then it literally clicked after that. I was like, this is the place that God wants me to do my procedure. He was just like, the waters are stirred, jump right in. And it was at that point that I knew, like, okay, this is the decision that needs to, like, this is the place, like, this is what I'm going to do. So, because every other option just like was delayed, it wasn't like, I didn't feel right. Like, God was like, no, like, because he showed me a dream a year before. It was just like, all those were just like, whoa. But like, whenever it's God, there's confirmation, there's clarity, there's peace. And that's all the things that I felt with choosing this place. So I ended up moving forward with them, and then we scheduled the procedure probably like a few weeks, like a month after that. They had to do a biopsy first just to make sure that there was no cancer. 2 weeks later, I went and I did the procedure. So it was just like, it was overwhelming, but I was at peace after that because I knew that this was all getting taken care of and God's hand was all over it. I just remember the day before the procedure, I was talking to Giselle and I was just like kind of reflecting over the year, because this has been going on since April of, the realizing I had severe anemia and then finding out I had fibroids. But I was just like, wow, like the enemy was really trying to take me out. Looking back, like I was so just like calm throughout it. And that's really the peace of the Lord, because why I wasn't bawling my eyes out when I was sitting in that emergency room, it was the Lord. But the enemy was really trying to take me out. And I knew that, especially when my mom had shared the dream, the enemy thought that he won. The enemy thought like, okay, we got her now. Like we can take her out, and like, and it's so interesting that my mom had that dream, because she was like usually sharing like, I don't usually remember my dreams and stuff. And so I know the enemy likes to be crafty in that sense of not allowing you to like remember your dreams. So, in our dreams, we are seeing things in the spiritual realm. And it is God's mercy that he allows us to remember certain dreams, because there are key things that he shares with us in there. There are things that he shows us, although sometimes they can be scary, he's showing us for a reason so we can pray and come against it. So that way, just like we can agree with things, so it is so on earth as it is in heaven, we can also pray so that things that are happening in the spiritual realm, in the demonic spiritual realm, that they don't happen on earth, by praying and interceding. And so I'm just so grateful and thankful to God, because just even in that moment, like the enemy thought he had me. The enemy thought he literally was going to take me out, because the level of anemia that I had, the doctors were even confused. Like, have you passed out? Have you been dizzy? Like, I could have been passed out somewhere. No one even knew. I could have been driving and passed. Like, the possibilities are endless. And I'm just grateful that like I had that checkup, that I didn't leave. Like even that was warfare, because I almost left because I was a few minutes late and they were catching an attitude. And I was like, okay, like, or it would have been rescheduled and it would have just been so late. But I'm just thankful for God's mercy, his love, and his kindness towards me, even in the situation. So yeah, the day of the surgery, my sister came, my parents were there, and I had the surgery. They told me it'll take an hour, but the surgeon did come in and say, like, you have a lot of fibroids. I'm like, everybody keeps saying that. So it did take a little longer than normal. So it was around like 2 hours, and I just remember waking up and like so much pain. I was like fidgeting, it was kind of blurry, and I just see the nurse running towards me, and she was just like, what's your pain? Like, and I was like, it's an 8. So they gave me some Dilaudid, I believe, and I just remember like kind of falling back asleep and then like waking up, and I was like, okay, it's like at a 4. So I like got ready because I was able to go home. So my parents came and took me home, and it was painful. I should probably make another video, because this video is probably so long, and I really just wanted to share all the details to show you that like God is in the details, and like God truly, truly, truly like had his hand on me even before all of this went down. And so it just shows you that like the enemy thinks that he wins, but he was already defeated when Jesus Christ died on the cross, right? So he tries, but he will fail every time. And especially when you recognize that because you are a child of God, because the Holy Spirit lives within you, the enemy can't win. It may seem like he's winning, especially like when your thoughts try to tell you that things are not going to work out. He lies to you to make you feel like you're defeated. Meanwhile, he's already defeated, but he's just trying to make you feel like you're defeated when that's not true. It's just beautiful because a year before, God showed me in the dream, hey, don't take this injection. Showed my mom in the dream, hey, you need to pray for your daughter. Literally that same day I was in the hospital for a head issue. So she was already praying, didn't even know why. Even throughout finding out about this, I remember having a dream where there was someone in my house, and I just remember I was trying to tell them to leave. I was just like, you need to go. Like, why are you here? And when I started getting angry, like, no, you need to get out. The person transforms into a demon and literally yells at me and was like, you and the media team took my life. And I was just like, oh, talk about spiritual warfare, y'all. Like, it's crazy. But even that dream, and it was so crazy because literally the next day, the leader of the media team wrote in the chat, like, hey guys, I feel prompted for us to do a fast. And I was like, wow, like, spiritual. The reason why I share these things on my channel is because I want y'all to understand that this life is spiritual, and whether you want to believe it or not, like, it is. And so it's better that you believe it and that you pray so that the enemy doesn't take advantage of you, and you know who you are in Christ, and you can recognize that you can pray, you can fast, and you can stomp on the head of the enemy and recognize the authority and the power that you have because the Holy Spirit lives in you. Or you can just pretend like you don't and let the enemy utilize you. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but that dream kind of just showed me in that your service to God, and even my leader was saying this, she was like, your service to God is not just you serving and you going about your life. Like, serving on the media team, because I was like, why would this demon be mad that, like, I'm on the media team? And it's like, when you're serving God, it's not just about like, oh, I'm just doing this, like, oh, it's whatever. But through your service, there's deliverance. Like, when you are working for God, like, the enemy is big mad. And there's deliverance, there's breaking down of strongholds. Like, I would never think that me, like, editing a video or me having to hold the camera or do something was causing deliverance, was causing the enemy to be mad, was causing like strongholds to be broken. Because the fact that the demon said that me and the media team took its life shows me that that was deliverance, shows me that that demon was mad because I broke free from whatever hold that it had over my life. And this may sound so confusing or so weird to anyone who's watching this, but I guess I gotta do a whole nother video on deliverance. I don't know if I'm the perfect person for it, but you know, deliverance is in the Bible. Jesus delivered the man from all the demons, and then the demons were casted into the pigs. Like, this is real stuff. But anyways, so that dream kind of just showed me that, like, although the enemy had plans to take me out literally, that also showed me that God is already 10,000 steps ahead. Oh, and you know what's so crazy? This is another dream that I had. I remember having a dream where I was at my parents' house, and I opened the fridge and there was a bottle of multivitamins. And I was just like, I kind of woke up and I was just like, I think I need to be taking multivitamins. And I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure that in the dream it said multivitamins with iron. Like, that was like specific. And I just remember I did start taking vitamins, and this was like a year before everything. So like, I know that matters would have been so much worse had God not been covering me, keeping me, and protecting me. Because although like everything went down and it was just like so scary and so overwhelming, it could have been worse. The enemy's plan was definitely way worse. But God, in his infinite love for me and his mercy for me, kind of just showed me that, yes, this is all scary, but trust that this all got exposed now, so that way it can be taken care of. I really just truly thank God for my family. Like, I can't even go into all of it, but my family and my friends have just been such a blessing. You don't realize how much you need community until you need community. And my sister coming here all the way from Pennsylvania, like leaving the kids with her husband, and she like came back home and was like helping me use the bathroom, and like I cannot say thank you enough to my friends and family for coming, for bringing food and cooking for me. And I'm not trying to get emotional. Even from my leaders and my pastors who really gave me words of encouragement, covered me in prayers, and all those who like were reaching out to me and stuff. Like, I'm just truly thankful. I'm truly, truly thankful. And for those of you who feel like you can do life alone, I promise you, you can't. And this is why God encourages us to have community, because we need it. Like, we really need it. Literally, I had my post-op appointment and the surgeon was just like, the fibroids you had was where the baby was supposed to be. So now it's all cleared out. I was like, thank God. So, I know that God was definitely doing all of this, or expose all of this, so that it could be taken care of. I'm glad that this didn't get way worse than it could have been. I'm glad that I was in a situation where, like, who knows, like, I was married and my husband and I are trying to have kids, and we're like so confused as to like what's going on, infertility or having to wait. And because like your body, like my body needs to heal before a baby can go in there. So I'm just grateful that this happened now. And so when the husband comes, we are ready. My body, my uterus is ready to hold a child. And so that was one of the things that God was just showing me, like, hey, I'm taking care. I'm clearing out the things that don't need to be in your life. So that way, the things that I know you're desiring and I know that you're looking for, when they do come, you will be ready to go. So I just kind of wanted to share my testimony and share this video, because for any woman who, the doctors have told you have fibroids, for any woman who is scared about that, and they're saying all sorts of things. They said a lot of things about fertility and all these things that was just so scary. But God, in his mercy and his love for me, literally showed me, like, don't worry about that. He's like, don't worry about it. You're fine. Take care of this. And yeah, and just letting you know you have options, which I didn't realize. The first thing was it's like open myomectomy. That's it. That's what you got to do. And yeah, but God, even like when my pastor spoke to me, she was like, don't schedule anything. And that was also God just like showing me, like, this is not the route I want you to go. And then when I found the laparoscopic, route, he was like, green light, go ahead. So God even cares about those decisions. Like, he cares about all the decisions in your life. And so I definitely want to encourage you to pray and seek God and ask him, like, hey, like, what should I be doing? Because I don't know. And he will really make it clear. Like, he will make it so clear as to what to do. So I'll share like another video kind of like going through, I guess, more of the science and the pharmacy and like the medical aspect to kind of give that encouragement, like what procedure I did, who I did it with, like all that. But in this video, I really wanted to focus on just the testimony aspect and just how God really, truly cares for you. He cares for me. He loves me that much that like everything happened how it's supposed to. So I'm still recovering, I'm not gonna lie, from my procedure. It's been like 2 weeks now. Definitely still have more energy. I have more energy than before, but I just have to take it easy still. Like, it's like mentally I want to just go, 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 but my body's like, wait, wait, wait. Like my incisions are still a little tender. So just being careful and just taking my time. Um, yeah, so that's my testimony on how God literally saved my life and showed me ahead of time, honestly. And I just want to encourage anyone who's watching this, woman or man, like God cares about you that much that he is already 10,000 steps ahead of the enemy. So whatever situation you're going through, just know that God is not ignorant to what is happening. Like he's very much aware, and he already has the end result already planned out. He already knows that everything's going to be fine. He already has it all planned out. So although it might be hard, although it might be scary, you have to trust that um, the enemy's already defeated on the cross. So don't let him make you think that you're defeated, because he, in fact, is the one that's defeated. So I pray that that's encouragement to you, that like God is already ahead of the game. He's already there. He's already 10,000 steps ahead. So whatever it is that you're dealing with, whatever it is that you're going through, just trust that he's going to take care of you. And he's in the details. Like he will seriously confirm, clarify, and give you peace on how to move forward. So yeah, so that's what's been going on. I'm happy that everything is, done. The surgeon showed me a picture of the fibroids, and I'll put it here if you guys want to see it. Just warning, if you don't like to see stuff like that, then you can cut the video here. But yeah, he took out 15 fibroids, and they were significant in size. But he said that things should be a lot better now moving forward, as far as like my period goes. It should be much lighter. I'm definitely making a lot of changes to help ensure that this doesn't happen again. Of course, I pray and believe that affliction will not happen a second time in the name of Jesus. But also just taking practical steps too, which I'll share in other videos to come. So stay tuned if you are interested in seeing all of that, or put any questions that you have that you want me to talk about or go over. But this video is strictly like for the testimony portion. So yeah, that's that. Y'all already know the deal. You can comment below, or you can email me at behismasterpiece@gmail.com. Go out, be kind, be caring, be loving, and as always, be his masterpiece.